corrections. We have no restricted dollars. It's all our general fund money. So those are some of our big expenditures, just as an example. So we have to decide on the money that we have available, that is general fund, where to use it in these 19 different budgets. It's a big job. When we start with the fact that we have subcommittees, and these subcommittees are each one is in charge of one of these budgets. Half of the subcommittees start in the fall, or I should say about January, in the House, and the other half start in the Senate. So we split these budgets up, and about the 1st of April, we trade. We take the budgets the House had, and the House takes the budgets the Senate had, and we divvy them up again, and we massage them again, and then sometime in May we'll have what we call a final revenue estimating conference. We'll try to figure out really how much money we really have to spend, and we come up with some targets, what we hope to have and where we should be spending our money. We come to an agreement, then we finally finish the budgets. Hopefully, the budget that starts the first day of October will be finished somewhere in July, so that people know in advance how much money they're going to have to spend in these different departments. With the times we're in right now, our revenues have fallen, and actually in the last 2 months they've fallen drastically, about $100 million a month. So we have to keep readjusting these budgets. The appropriations process is to readjust the budgets. Money doesn't get spent in this state unless it is appropriated properly, and that goes through the appropriations committees, then to the full House and Senate floors, and then to the governor. So it's a long, involved process. I'm sorry if I'm drawing it out too far, but it is a long process, and it's there for checks and balances. Yeah. One person doesn't get their way. It has to be by agreement of a lot of people, and it takes a lot of study and a lot of understanding to know where this money is, how much there is, and what the best place to spend it is. There are many good programs that don't get funded because there isn't enough money, and that's just the way it has to be. You do that same thing at home.
Yeah. What I find interesting is what starts this whole process is really the governor saying, here's my concept of what a budget should be.
That's
in all
the beginning.
19. So as you talked about that process, it really started with the governor saying, here's my priorities, and legislature, you go at it and then do everything you just talked about. What I also want to talk about is, you talked about restricted funds, and that pulls me right into the stimulus money, because everybody's talking about the stimulus money. Yesterday, you and I were on a committee to, especially just oversee the stimulus money. Can you talk about kind of what's happening with the stimulus here in Michigan? Sure. And a little process to that.
Well, of course, the stimulus money's purpose is to stimulate the economy, to kickstart things, get people working. We're looking at about $2.9 billion coming to Michigan to stimulate the economy. And it comes, again, with restrictions. Some of it is very restricted. You must use it for this or must use it for that. There will be some, not a great deal, but there will be some ability to move some of this money around where we want it. But as an example, yesterday we did the transportation funding. That's very, very prescriptive. In other words, we know where it has to go. Transportation has to go to roads and buses and transportation. About $872 million that we moved out of subcommittee yesterday. Today we will vote on it in full committee, and then it will go to the full House, or full Senate floor, I should say, for movement. The House has already passed this budget. So once we get this finished, it'll go to the governor for signing. The reason that we moved very quickly on this was because this money must be spent within 120 days of the time that the president signed the bills. We want to make sure that our money is taken care of and spent, because if it's not, the state loses it. We are actually looking forward in this budget that we did to get some money from some other states that aren't as ready as we are. And if they don't get their money encumbered and spent in time, they lose it, we get it. So we're working on that, to get more money to our roads. Every area, whether it be education or again, energy, labor, and economic growth or whatever it is, these dollars go to these different areas. It's our job to scrutinize these dollars, make sure they're getting used correctly, and if there is a choice of where we can spend these, we want to scrutinize and make sure that they go to the best place. And and we also don't want to show partisanship or favorite areas or anything like that. We want all the people of the state of Michigan to enjoy the stimulus money equally.
And that's really one of the reasons that you and the majority leader have set up an extra committee, which is brand new, just to oversee the stimulus, to really do what you just said.
That's right. We have set up a entire new subcommittee of appropriations that it's our job is totally stimulus money, to oversee that stimulus money. So all stimulus money that's going to be spent in Michigan, even if it's prescriptive, in other words, even if the federal government put all the strings on it and said it must be used here, it still has to be appropriated through this subcommittee to full committee.
And then one more piece of that is what I think many of us have talked about is if somebody gets stimulus money, I think one of the things that we have talked about and comes out in this committee is this is only a one-time amount of money, which you kind of preach. If you're a preacher in any area, as chair of appropriations, I hear you say that often is this is not coming again next year and the next year. And so, kind of expand a little bit on that.
That's very true, and I try to warn people about that. This money will come over 2 years. We won't get it all this week. We'll get it doled out to us. But at the end of 2 years, it will stop coming. And the danger is when you get 2.6 or 2.9, or maybe it'll be $5 billion. When you get $5 billion one time, you don't inflate your budget and think that you're going to keep getting this money. We have to be very careful not to increase our budget. This money should only be spent on one-time expenditures. How would you feel if we expanded a department and hired you to work in this department, and then 2 years from now say, well, we don't have any money, we can't afford to keep you anymore, you've just lost your job. That's not fair to people, and that's not what we want to do. We don't want to, in 2 years, and by the way, when that happens 2 years from now, I won't be in the legislature anymore because of term limits. I don't want to see my successor stuck with this job of, my gosh, what do we do now? Now we're $2.9 billion short of the budgets. That wouldn't be right.
Yeah.
So we don't want to inflate the budgets. We want to keep them flat to the point that we can afford to maintain them with our revenues, use this $2.9 billion or whatever it turns out to be to stimulate the economy with one-time spending. That's really important. I don't know how we can emphasize that enough.
Right. Yeah, and that's been a kind of a constant conversation for many of us here in the Senate, trying to make sure people understand that. And it's very difficult, like you say, that a lot of folks, they just want the money in whatever area they happen to be advocating for. But it's really hard for them to understand that concept, or maybe want to understand that concept.
Well, one problem is right now we're going to have to reduce our budgets. This budget we are in right now, the '09 budget, as I mentioned, the revenues are coming short. We know that we're $200 million short. We may be more than that in May. We could simply use some of this stimulus money, maintain the budget, and go on with our lives. But the point is that what are we going to do next year? That means that we will be short 2 or 3 or 400 million the following year, and it'll get bigger the following year. We still have to make those cuts somewhere, so let's do it now and get down to where we need to be and live within our means.
Well, I know we have our hands full with all of this, but maybe there's some other areas that you'd like to talk about on the stimulus, because I think in the media we've heard $7 to $8 billion might be coming to Michigan. You mentioned a number just now, 2.9 billion. Curious if we know even how much money is coming to Michigan over the next probably 2 years or so.
We are learning every day.
That's
we have We have excellent people in fiscal agencies and